First Person is produced in cooperation with the Far East Broadcasting Company, who rejoice in the stories of changed lives through the power of Jesus Christ. Learn more at febc.org.
God moves in ways that are immeasurably more than all we could ever ask, think, or imagine. I could tell stories of former gang members who have found a true family in Christ. God turns what the enemy meant to destroy them and into glory and beauty.
Welcome to First Person, a weekly conversation with someone who knows what it's like to have your life changed through the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm Wayne Shepherd, and in a few moments we'll meet a young pastor whose life was dramatically changed from homelessness and drug addiction to a life of helping others who struggle. Thanks for listening. Anytime you want to share one of our interviews with someone else, you can do that easily by using our website, firstpersoninterview.com, or use any podcast app to find us and listen and share anytime. Just search for First Person Interview. And by the way, all past programs are found there as well. Listen at your convenience. Let's begin. We're going to hear the story of Zac Holt. Zac was one of those people we often drive by and see who have reached rock bottom. He was a drug addict with little to hope for in his life. But then, well, you'll hear him tell the story now. But as we began talking, I asked him to describe the atmosphere of the Bristol, Virginia ministry called the Table Ministries.
It is a beautiful circus. It is wild. Our crowd is rowdy and messy. We are in the fray with the unhoused, with the incarcerated, with the addicted, and but amidst all of that, I see more beauty in our ministry than in any other church I've been a part of. That's so raw and real, and no one is unaware of the brokenness that they're experiencing, and no one is pretending. There's no facade. It's all just right there. And so in a moment I'll share more about my story, but it's beautiful how God has repurposed all of the brokenness from my past to create space for me to build bridges to people who are now where I once was.
That is amazing. Most people would run the other direction. You run towards the flames here, huh?
Well, I do, and I think it's largely because I can resonate. I see myself in the man holding a cardboard sign because that was part of my story. I struggled for a lot of years with drug addiction, and in the course of that, ended up on the street, in and out of jail, recovery centers, homeless shelters, halfway houses. And what's beautiful is when the Lord met me in a jail cell, and didn't shame me, but embraced me, opened my eyes to both my sinfulness and this abounding love that just rocked my world. Once I was set free from all of that, I had this hunger and this yearning for people to taste and see the goodness of God. And so each of those spaces are ministry activities for us now. So we have active ministries to the unhoused, and we have incarnational expressions of gatherings in homeless shelters and halfway houses and recovery centers, and all these spaces that used to represent such shame and darkness and bondage are now these outposts of kingdom activity and flourishing. And it's just wild, Wayne, how God can turn what the enemy meant against us for his good and his glory.
It's a story we need to hear. So I, again, appreciate you telling that to us here today, Zac. So where does it begin for you? How did God use your life to begin all this?
I started into drugs when I was about 13 years old. Oh. And I didn't know who I was. So I was searching for acceptance and significance. And I thought I'd found it in the crowd I was running with and the compromises that I made. And so I got wrapped up in that life. And I didn't have a deep relationship with God. He was more of like a spare tire that I would pull out in case of an emergency. But I always had this sense that God was going to use me. And when I was 4, I told my mom I was going to be a catcher for the Atlanta Braves and a preacher in the off season. And I love playing baseball. And and I'd forgotten those words until my mother reminded me many, many years later. And so I think there was always a part of me that was set apart for the work that I'm doing. And when I came out on the other side of incarceration with, I was on probation, really tight leash with a court-ordered program. But I just fell in love with Jesus, and every day I would sit on my mom's back porch, and I would drink my coffee, and I would just experience him in this visceral way that just I would cry every single day at just how good he was, and how could he possibly love me, knowing full well all the compromises, all the sin. Because for so many years, I rejected his hand, I rejected his love, and I was mastered by my addiction. I was an unwilling participant at a certain point in debauchery and depravity and breaking into houses and doing things I never thought that I would do. And when he brought me out of that and opened my eyes, I dove head first. And one of the beautiful things that I've come to believe in my own life and see it in the lives of the men that I pour into now in our discipleship ministry is it's one thing to get the people out of Egypt in the book of Exodus. It's another thing to get Egypt out of the people.
Yeah.
And so even though I was brought out of my Egypt, I was set free from my addiction, from condemnation. The real beauty was the process of sanctification, the process of getting Egypt out of me. And so this journey I was on and still am on with Jesus, to give you another biblical story, in Daniel 3, we meet Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, renamed by Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And on the other side of their experience in the fiery furnace, it says that they didn't even smell like smoke. And I believe that the transformation of Christ in my life is so thorough that I have to convince people now that, I'm a felon. I was once incarcerated. I've had overdoses. I held a cardboard sign, because the transformation is so extreme, and I look back at the person I used to be, and it's just a shell. And now I get to watch the men in our discipleship ministry not just get out of Egypt, but get Egypt out of themselves. Like, to see them walking in the fullness of what Christ died to provide, to see them become fathers and leaders and entrepreneurs and church planters and chaplains, and the beauty for me is not as much of what we're saved from, but what we're saved for, because he repurposes all of that brokenness to bring beauty into the world. The language we use is that we went from recreation to recreation.
Yeah.
And so much of our lives were just about feeling good, doing what we wanted. It was all fun and games until it wasn't. It was about recreation. And God intercedes in the gospel, and God intercedes with the cross, and the words are spelled the same, but the hyphen makes all the difference, because I believe that when the cross interrupts our recreation and he shows us what true life is about, fully alive life of John 10:10, that we see that we're wired for recreation. So it's just it's a lot of fun. I feel every day like I'm a little kid. And somebody told me years ago, Wayne, that they're like, one day you're going to come off of that pink cloud and you're going to be like the rest of us. And so my prayer is, Lord, I want to stay on it. Like,
not yet, Lord, not yet. So with those strikes against you, though, I mean, how did you get a toehold in what you do? I mean, was there someone who came along who discipled you?
The first phase of my journey, I realized that I didn't know anything about myself, and I didn't know anything about God. Calvin talks about how knowledge of God and knowledge of self are one and the same, that we can't really know God until we know ourselves, and we can't really know ourselves until we know God. And so I had a recovery mentor, a person whose recovery I admired, but I also had a spiritual mentor, a guide, and a man who discipled me and pointed me in the right direction. As that journey continued, discipleship became a huge part of my life, because I know that life on life change it takes deep investment. You've got to be not just invested, but involved. And today, some of the greatest discipleship I have with the men that I lead is hanging sheetrock, or going to repair one of our ladies her porch, or just driving to Ace Hardware, or going to a concert. And it's life together, and it's the conversations that come up. I was pulling. We have squash that's grown, just blown up, and tomatoes and peppers, and so Noah came over, and we were picking squash and just talking about harvest and talking, and so it's just in my DNA, I think, because I was discipled well, to be able to disciple others. When I started, I felt the calling to go to seminary about 3 years in, and so I went through and got my master's of divinity, and in the process of that, part of the requirement is you have to do a supervised ministry internship, and so I signed on with a Christian church in our area, and in the midst of that assignment, we had this crazy idea. There was a local recovery center that was opening up, and we thought, well, what could it look like to plant a church that meets in the recovery center, that is led by people in recovery, trying to reach people, chasing recovery. And so that's how the Table Ministries was born, was in the midst of my internship, stepping into planting a non-traditional, incarnational expression of the local church.
Because they may be welcomed into a local church, but they may not feel welcomed, right?
Exactly. And just like in the garden, the real problem, Adam wasn't separated from God because of his sin. He was separated from God because of his shame. And so God shows up for the walk in the cool of the day. But it was Adam who ran and hid. And one of the, if not the greatest opposition that we face as men and women in recovery is shame. I believe that guilt is healthy. Guilt says I did a bad thing, but shame says I'm a bad person. And so shame is an assault on our identity. So we come into recovery with feelings of unworthiness. We compare ourselves out. We feel unwelcome. We feel unwanted. Even amidst a Christian congregation, which may have their arms wide open, we battle with that shame that says, I am a bad person. So then, of course, our behavior follows our identity and all that.
We're getting to know Zac Holt and learning about the Table Ministries in Virginia. More with Zac coming up in a moment.
I'm Ed Cannon of the Far East Broadcasting Company, and we're happy to help Wayne provide these first-person interviews to you each week. In addition to the program you're listening to, Wayne joins me in hosting a weekly podcast called Until All Have Heard, telling the remarkable stories of the Far East Broadcasting Company. You'll learn how God is using FEBC to proclaim the gospel in all forms of technology available. We're committed to continue taking Christ to the world. Join us at febc.org to listen to Until All Have Heard. Now let's return to First Person.
My guest is Zac Holt. Zac is the founder of the Table Ministries. I want to hear all about this because this is so unique. Again, it's located in Bristol, Tennessee, Virginia. Take your pick, right? You're in that area, which is an interesting part of the country, isn't it? I mean, are you a native of that part of the world?
So I moved here from Richmond, Virginia, about a week after my high school graduation, with my mom and my dad and my daughter, who I had when I was 16. And we moved from the city of Richmond to Southwest Virginia. And I love the mountains. I enjoy cycling and hiking. My wife and I go camping all the time. Beautiful. And so I consider myself a native at this point.
Okay. So tell me about the Table Ministries. You mentioned the fact that it's a church, isn't it?
Yeah. So and that's how we're set up with the IRS. We meet ecclesial minimums. It's the most church that I've ever been a part of, and yet sometimes it looks the least like any church I've ever been to.
Why? What makes it different?
Man, I think that there is such an atmosphere of acceptance. There is such a depth of authenticity. Sometimes I struggle with the facade that can feel like is present in some more traditional religious spaces. And I think I hunger and I yearn for the raw and the real, because that's exactly where I was when Jesus met me. And for me, my spiritual progress was limited for the duration of my performance and my pretending. I had to take that mask off, and really expose myself to him and be vulnerable before him. I spent so many years covering with fig leaves that I almost didn't know how to live without them. I just cover and cover and cover. And so I appreciate the spaces that we've created, whether they're in jails or nursing homes, or our main hub gathering is on Sunday nights at a local Boys and Girls Club. We feed a ton of people, and we have different churches and small groups that supply the food, different worship leaders that do the music. But my favorite moment every Sunday night is when we take communion together, and to see faces covered in tattoos, to be with folks that are wheelchairs, that are every color, every socioeconomic, from community pillars and entrepreneurs to folks that literally brought their cardboard sign in with them, and to see the community come together under one banner, and just to see it's beautiful, man, because our folks, they come in with so much baggage and so much hurt, but we create a safe space for people to just let down their guard, pull up a chair, and be who they are right where they are. And something happens at the kitchen table. And Jesus ate with the people that nobody else wanted to eat with. And when we sit down with another person and say, "Hey, tell me your story," it's through it's through our stories, I think, that we have connection with one another in a way that's really powerful and visceral. And we realize that we're all the same kind of different, that we're all children of God. We may have different paths. We may have different housing situations or vocational situations. But once you peel some of that back and you realize that we're all restless until we find our rest in God. We're all broken until we experience the healing of Christ. And
we
our
all need him, whether we realize it or not.
Yes, absolutely.
But you're not content to see them clean and sober. This goes far beyond that, doesn't
it? Absolutely. One of my favorite stories is when the friends of the paralytic, they want their friend to get to Jesus so bad, but it's crowded, so they have to tear the roof off. And so often what I see in recovery work is the ceiling of a person in recovery is their self-limiting belief. And so we remove that roof, and we help them to dream and to feel worthy of walking towards those dreams in the Spirit. And so our discipleship ministry is unique in that our goalpost is we want to see church planters, we want to see entrepreneurs, we want to see them add value to the city, to go from being a taker to being a contributor. And so we set the goalpost way out there, and we remove the roof, and we walk with them with coaching and support, community partners that help them learn how to budget, help them learn how to invest, help them, learn kind of how to navigate through those pieces, mental health providers that come beside them with some of those professional services that they need. And then, of course, men who cheer for them and show up for them. And that's so rare, Wayne, because a lot of these people that we pour into, they've never had anybody say, "Look, I see this in you. I see such potential in you. Like, I want to walk with you. I really think that you can start this business. I really think that God is going to be with you as you start into seminary. I really think, that you would make a great church planter." And nobody's ever given them permission. There's always been the ceiling that's been there. And so we remove the roof, and we help them dream big, and then walk with them to see that fulfilled.
That's incredible. How do you support this ministry?
Yeah, so it happens a couple of different ways. As most missionaries, I'm self-supported. So I travel and speak at different congregations, share our vision, what we're doing. We have some consistent financial partners that pour in and support our big initiatives and our projects that we're working on. Our hope over the next several years is that we'll be able to create some revenue streams internally through these gifts that our guys have. Like just now, I left Mark, who's a painter, Andre, who's a certified electrician, Kenny, has his Class C carpentry, and like all these guys that are in our ministry right now. And it's like we literally have the whole team. Every piece that you need, we have together. So, we really want to create revenue from within, so that we're not always in the business of asking, but I want to say, related to that we use the term friendraising instead of fundraising, because what we've seen, Wayne, is that when we build these partnerships with churches or individuals, the beauty and the value that we see on the other side, we've seen a couple of people that are not our target demographic, very affluent, and yet they started coming around and seeing what God was doing, and all of a sudden it became this deep friendship, and their lives changed. Yeah. They weren't expecting it. They thought they were going to be the ones, just helping, and now it's just so you never know what happens when you come near the fire of God is burning, and just so we love what we get to do, but that's generally how it works.
Okay. Find out where God is working and be a part of that.
Absolutely.
Right?
Where are you working?
Sure.
How can I join you?
Yeah, that's great. All right, we have a couple of moments left. Can you just outline maybe one of the men's stories of a turnaround, someone who had hit rock bottom and has been involved in discipled through your ministry now? And just tell us a quick story, if you would.
So when I met Shane, Shane was homeless, and he was in the park in downtown Bristol. And I asked him, I said, Shane, if God could do one big thing for you, one huge thing for you, impossible thing for you, what would it be? And he said, I have an idea, but there's no way your God can do this. He said, I haven't seen my boys in 5 years. They live in Idaho. They don't even know where I am. I want to be with my boys on a Saturday morning, and I want to wake them up with blueberry pancakes in bed. And I said, okay, let's pray. So about 2 years later, Shane makes it through our program. And then about 9 months ago, I get a call from Shane, and he's in Idaho. He calls me and he says, you'll never guess what I'm doing. No. He said, I'm making blueberry pancakes for my boys. Do you remember that prayer that we prayed all those years ago? And I said, I remember it like it was yesterday. And so what we see is not just guys getting clean. We see dads becoming fathers. We see restoration in every area of their lives, that God moves in ways that are immeasurably more than all we could ever ask, think, or imagine. I could tell stories of former gang members who have found a true family in Christ, men who were sexually abused and assaulted, who are now acting as advocates for children who have no voice and feel alone in the midst of their trauma, on and on and on, how God turns what the enemy meant to destroy them and into glory and beauty.
That's Zac Holt, Senior Pastor of the Table Ministries, which is a church totally committed to its community through offering gospel help and hope in so many ways to people who are often written off by society. If you'd like to learn more about Zac and the Table Ministries, please visit firstpersoninterview.com. We'll place a link to all they're doing in the name of Christ. That's firstpersoninterview.com. And to re-listen and share this program, use that same website. On the right-hand side, there's also a list of podcast portals where you can hear First Person. And a special word of thanks to the Far East Broadcasting Company for help in bringing these interviews to you each week. To learn about this ministry committed to reaching the world for Christ, visit febc.org and ask for the prayer target, learning to pray for the nations, febc.org. Now, with thanks to my friend and producer Joe Carlson, I'm Wayne Shepherd. Thanks for listening to First Person.